Right now, it's time to bring in Brian Ross. Brian joins us on Thursday mornings at this time for Real News. Good morning, Brian.
Good morning to you, Marshall.
And I'll tell you what, yesterday was a day that should have shaken the boots of just about every American. And that is with these books coming out written by generals and the really describing what you can only describe as the horrific attempt by the President of the United States to try a bloodless coup.
Absolutely, with the general, the chief of staff of the armed forces saying that they thought it was like a Reichstag. It was going to conjure up images of the Hitler Nazi takeover of Germany in 1933. That he actually feared that is stunning to me. And these books, there's 3 or 4 of them now, and they really reveal a lot of what's happening. And just imagine how close this election was if it had gone the other way.
Well, the whole thing with this is what I'm anticipating is that when the congressional hearings open up, will these generals, if they're brought in to testify, now that they've got it out in a book, do you think they'll actually bring it up in testimony?
Well, they will be under oath if they are there to testify, and yes, they'll be required to testify, and we'll hear from them directly. In this case, in the book by the Washington Post reporters Carol Linick and Philip Hunt, they are quoting aides who just had these conversations with the general. So they don't have it directly from the general himself, but it sounds like he's not knocking it down either.
It was when you heard it's not just one general, but several generals, and then I saw former Defense Secretary Cohen be interviewed, and he showed a great amount of concern too. And there's about as middle of the road guy as you can get with politics.
Well, the concern was that Trump was going to either create some sort of military crisis and launch a nuclear war. So you've got Speaker of the House Pelosi calling Milley to say, "Is there a way to block him? Can we do that?" And he had to reassure it's going to be okay. And then his concern was, as he talked to Trump more and more, that he was going to take over the CIA and the Pentagon, and then use the military to seize the election, essentially.
Amazing, it's something that in my 68 years, I just never thought I would see in this country. Generals actually speaking out something like this.
Well, so much that was bad happened in those days after the election, all going back to Trump and his big lie. And, this week we saw a powerful speech from President Biden talking about that big lie and the challenge to democracy. It was the first time really in his presidency that I saw Joe Biden essentially shake the rafters with an impassioned speech about the importance of ignoring this big lie and passing legislation in Washington that would essentially stop the Republicans' efforts in states around the country dead in their tracks.
It's just an amazing thing to look at. But the whole sad thing about this is that we're so tribal in this nation that members of the Republican Party who used to support the military and who used to support, they're not going to believe this, and that's the thing that I find amazing. They're not going to believe generals who, by the way, agree with that there should be a civilian at the top of the military. I mean, that's what scares me the most, is that there's still 33 to 35% of the people that won't believe any of this.
And that's in part, Marshall, and this is important, I think, that they're not hearing about it. I mean, it is not being reported on Fox News. Fox did not carry Joe Biden's speech live. They had other things to talk about that they thought were more newsworthy. And we're not talking about the opinion shows at night, but during their actual breaking news coverage, they deemed the president's speech about this not to be newsworthy. They did not carry it. So Fox News viewers did not hear Biden's speech, and they probably aren't hearing much about these books. So for them, it's a distant sort of noise that they're not troubled by because they don't really understand it. They're not hearing it. Everyone has their own sort of media ecosystem now, and that's not a good thing.
All right. Now, one of the stranger stories that comes out, and it's no longer strange, it's a little disturbing, is the assassination in Haiti. And This looks a lot like what happened in Cuba many, many years ago, where the United States put together a ragtag group of people and then really didn't follow through with their attack to try to get rid of Castro. I'm not saying the United States set this up, but obviously this is an international, and these were paid hitmen.
Right, apparently organized by a very prosperous, prominent Haitian doctor who lives in Florida, who wanted to become president himself and hired this group. Now, they claim they were going to just arrest the president there, but in fact, he was shot dead in his bed, so it doesn't seem like the arrest was part of it. In any case, it's an ugly situation, and it again focuses, for the first time really in decades, U.S. attention on what's going on to the south and our borders. Not only with Haiti, with the request by the Haitians, which apparently has not so far been ignored, to send U.S. troops to help quell the turmoil, but also what's happening now in Cuba with street protests, YouTube videos calling for an end of 61 years of the communist-led government there. So a lot is happening, and for the first time really in decades that I can recall, it's a front-page issue for this White House.
Just some amazing times and some amazing things going on. I mean, the international situation right now requires people like Joe Biden and other international leaders that really do know how to use politics to calm things down, because there's just a lot of tension around the globe.
Without a doubt, and everyone's watching what moves China may make, because with one decision to go after the island of Taiwan, which they consider part of their territory, that would set off a potential Third World War, because we have pledged to defend Taiwan. So that is a very big point. Interestingly, let's talk for a second about the Russian criminal hackers. Last week, President Biden called Putin and said, "This must stop, you must take care of it." As of Tuesday morning, the criminal group responsible for some of this so-called ransomware attacks had disappeared off the network, off the dark net. They have just gone into hiding completely. They're no longer in business. And the question is, and I don't have the answer, and many are asking this question, did Putin hear Biden? Did Biden say, do this or else? And what was the or else? And this decision was made apparently after Biden made this call to Putin, and that group no longer exists on the web right now. They're out of business for the moment, at least.
Well, that's the interesting thing about having a leader that will work the back channels. As much as you can't trust certain political leaders, those efforts have to be made and made strong, and I don't think those efforts were ever made over the past 4 years, those back channel efforts.
Well, they certainly weren't. They were made on Twitter and on Facebook feeds from the president. So who knows what was in his head there. There's been criticism. Biden has been slow to push back against Russia or China, in fact, Mitch McConnell's calling, says the United States is being rolled over by China. I don't see evidence of that at all. And I do see evidence of the U.S. under Biden's leadership trying to forge a stronger alliance with Europe, which, put together Europe and the U.S. gives us the kind of might that we really need, both economically and militarily. And so the threat of a boycott or embargo from both the U.S. and Europe carries much more weight than it would have been if it's just the U.S. alone.
All right, and a final question to you as someone who is an investigative reporter. What do we have to do to get more people vaccinated?
Well, that's an excellent question. I was reading the comments yesterday of Senator Mitt Romney saying it's moronic. He can't understand why it is that people are not getting vaccinated, because we have a new pandemic of COVID cases, almost all among people who are not vaccinated. I mean, the evidence is there, the proof is there. And for the first time, Republican leaders have begun to speak out that this is important, that people should get vaccinated. They're not criticizing Rand Paul or Ron Johnson, the two senators from Kentucky and from Wisconsin, who have sort of created these conspiracy theories about the vaccine. But the Republicans are speaking out for the first time. Even Mitch McConnell said he thought it was a good idea for everyone to get vaccinated, without criticizing the senators who have, sort of led the conspiracy theories, or Fox News' Tucker Carlson, who every night throws gasoline on the conspiracy fire about the vaccines. But I think, in a word, if Mitt Romney put it, it is moronic. I don't really understand it. It's I guess in the American DNA not to be told what to do, but more and more it's clear that if you don't get vaccinated, you have a very good chance of picking up this latest Delta variant, which is highly contagious. It may or may not kill you, but it is not good. And and for parents not to even vaccinate their children, in a way, to me, is a kind of abuse. I mean, as more and more places, University of Maryland, for instance, demanding all students, faculty, be vaccinated for the return of classes this fall, as more employers insist on that as well, I think the tide will finally turn. But it's just stunning, as you say, that there are so many people. It becomes strangely political, largely Republicans who don't want to get vaccinated for whatever is in their head, whatever crazy reason they have.
What's interesting about this was when the vaccines came out, this country, and there's about 12 to 18% of this country that just don't believe in vaccinations, never have and never will. And in the calculations for herd immunity, whatever you want to call it, those people were already factored in. I don't think anybody expected really 60% of the Republican Party just to forego vaccinations because of politics. I don't think anybody foresaw that.
Yeah, and whether it's politics or whatever, I mean, Mitch McConnell made a point that I think Republicans should echo, which was let's give Donald Trump credit. He organized the Operation Warp Speed, which in record time created not one, not two, not three, almost 4 different vaccines. It was a record. It was a medical science history really being made. So let's acknowledge the great accomplishment of Donald Trump, if you are a Trump follower, and get the vaccine, which is, a clever way, I think, to appeal to the group that somehow feels like, I don't know what they actually feel. I can't even put my words to it, but it is, again, I'll go back to Mitt Romney, it is moronic.
Well, all I can say is, as every week goes by, I get more and more amazed at what is going on, not only in our country but across the world. And we need more people like you and other dedicated reporters around the world. And we need more news agencies to step forward and really try to bring all these points to not only the American people but the greater population at large in the world.
Well, let's hope that people listen, and let's not treat Americans like dummies. Let's just argue the facts, and the facts are so compelling, so strong. It doesn't have to be insulting, but I think it is moronic, truly, for people to understand what's going on. The cases in the low vaccination states like Missouri and Arkansas, Texas, Mississippi, and Nevada, and the outbreak is not taking place as much in big cities as it is in small towns, where people have a sense that they are immune to all this. And as we know from being in our own small town, Marshall, it's everywhere.
Well, the one stunning fact that 99.9% of the people who are dying now of COVID did not get vaccinated. That's
how much more do you have to say?
Yeah, that says it all. Well, we'll see what happens in the next week, Brian. Thanks for joining us, and have a great weekend.
You too. Always great to be here.
Take care. Brian Ross and Real News here at Robin Hood Radio. Of course, you can find Brian on our on-demand page, which is robinhoodradio.com. Click on On Demand, click on Brian Ross and Real News.